Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily Reese, which features a conversation with composer Greg Nicolett and his music for the game Potionomics. Potionomics is a 3D deck building / management sim where you brew and sell potions out of your potion shop, and you get to go on dates. And so you interact with all different types of characters. One of the cool things about this soundtrack is that each character basically has their own sonic world. So there are many different styles of music represented in the game, and that's very fun. Also many soloists, some of which you've seen on Level, like Kristen Nagus. Others, Patty Rudisell. I'd love to have her on someday, but she plays magnificent violin solos in the soundtrack. And Greg himself, he plays a trombone solo on a tune called Muktuk's Slumber, which is absolutely wonderful. Now, if you want to hear the music, we recommend you listen to the audio podcast. That's where you'll find the music. You won't find that here in this YouTube video. So lots of fun details in that music, and I absolutely loved talking to Greg about it. Join us on Discord. That link is down in the show notes. If you can support us on Patreon, that'd be fantastic. We just released a new exclusive sticker to patrons, so check that out at patreon.com/level. And do subscribe and get notifications to all the stuff we post right here on YouTube. All right, well, here is Greg Nicolett talking about his music for Potionomics. Thank you again for your time today. And I guess what we'll do is just kind of get started with, if you don't mind, describe the game, and then we'll talk more specifically about your music and things along those lines.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on the show, I guess we'll call it. Emily, this is fantastic. I love your show, and awesome. I'm excited to talk with you. So Potionomics has been described as a couple things. I think a lot of folks who were following the game thought that it would be more of a sort of a visual novel crossed with a dating sim, just because the aesthetic has, I think, what typically has been associated with more relaxed and chill games that have come before. But, then when it got released, everyone started to realize, well, it has those elements to it, but it also has this really sort of intense shopkeeping sim side of it that doesn't let up. It doesn't necessarily give you a lot of breathing room. And so if you read a lot of the reviews, folks are like, I had no idea this would be so hard, which I think is interesting. I knowing Jody, the developer, really well, I knew how passionate he was about trying to, give the players a bit of a feeling of what it likes and how hard it can be to be an entrepreneur, to be a shopkeeper, Yeah. But even within this sort of cozier aesthetic that the art and oftentimes the music has. And so sorry, was that notification me or you?
You.
I don't know. I swear.
I didn't hear it though. I did not hear it.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So just to satisfy that, there are sort of just a bunch of different mechanical systems that work together. There's the main game, which is a card-based game. It's a haggling system where you interact with customers that come in and you sell the potions that you've been brewing. But this interacts with deeply with all of the characters around the town who you travel to their shops, you buy your ingredients that you need for your potion making. And as you get to know them better, you collect cards, which really they're basically tips, little bits of wisdom, ideas for how to be a better shopkeeper, how to be a better potion maker. And each character sort of specializes in a different, range of tips. Like Muktuk is a craftsman. So, and he's sort of a spiritual, boisterous person. So he's going to give you cards that relate to confidence and bravado. Okay. While, one of the other characters, Luna, she's a marketing guru. So all of her stuff is going to be more about like advertising, and she'll even do marketing for you on the side. So that card game, that's the main thrust of it, interacts with all the other systems. There's gardening, there's adventuring. It's a lot of systems that all kind of work together into a whole.
Yeah. And so, the fact that there are all these elements that gave you the opportunity to do a lot of things musically. Now, the part that I opened with that I'm actually going to cut. So I'll repeat again.
Okay, sure.
Just for your benefit, so you know I'm not repeating myself at large. You know, the soundtrack starts in one way and then kind of goes through all these musical evolutions and styles and kind of geographical hints and things along those lines. So you're going all over the place, which is really cool. But you know, I'd love to hear you talk about like how that was explained to you, like what they asked of you musically and the decisions you made to create the sound of Potionomics.
Yeah. Well, Jadi, again, you know, I'm going to mention him a lot. He's the lead developer. He loves music, and he's a super fan of game soundtracks, to the point where he would be making really deep cut references that I wouldn't know. And I would often in meetings either be sort of Googling off screen or just outright admitting that I didn't know it. But, you know, you sort of have to, like, sometimes you're just like, well, maybe I'll just let it slide that I'm not catching that reference and look it up later.
Right.
But what he was throwing my way were just all these different references from all these different kinds of games. And even, you know, just he'd be into like Intuit throat singing one week, or, you know, just whatever, like just really interesting places. Now, my job as a composer, of course, is to take in all those influences and still create something that feels cohesive, which for this game, like you said, even though I was sort of trying to make it sound cohesive, it still is pretty much all over the place. So I sort of had to, in a way, because I had to sort of embrace this concept that each of these characters in the game almost has their own video game that they're walking out of, right? Like they're almost in their own little sonic worlds. Mm-hmm. And I sort of started thinking about the score in that way, that Muktuk has his own world that he lives in, and so his music's going to be this world and also this palette, the sound palette, while because Mint is sort of more of a classic adventurer and sort of she's nostalgic for in a way, her character is in a way nostalgic for games like Zelda and Chrono Trigger. So her palette's going to have a little bit of a chiptune vibe interspersed with her themes. Okay. And Sid is she's a rock musician. So her theme, she actually sort of plays her theme, right? I mean, we actually thought about having her literally play it on screen, but that became one of those things that was a little too difficult to implement on the indie budget because of the motion capture and all that would go into that.
Sure.
So I sort of started to embrace the score as having, I would say, three distinct parts. There's the music that plays when you're in Sylvia's shop, and that all sort of has I think a consistent vibe. There are those character themes that I mentioned earlier, and then there are the haggling themes, which are the tracks that play when you're in the card game mechanic, which you'll spend a lot of time there, and that section of the game is significant enough that I felt like it needed its own category of score. But I hope that's not too vague, but I can get more specific.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, and those were the versus tracks. Is that what you're talking about?
No, those are, well, yes, sort of. I mean, those are sort of that's sort of within that category, because the versus tracks are what you hear during the what's called the competition, which is a part of the game where you it's kind of silly, but you negotiate for the best price in front of a large crowd of the whole town gets together to watch you have this negotiation battle. And Jadi and I thought it would be really funny if during these high stakes negotiations, you heard boss battle music that was just as intense as anything you'd hear in a Final Fantasy game. So we went just nuts with those, and it's part of the charm of the game. It's part of the irony. I it's fun to write boss battle tracks. So I was glad we went there.
Oh, that's so funny, because I do know composers who do not like doing that. So what do you like about, and I mean, I also, of course, know people who love it. So what do you like about writing boss battle tracks?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can certainly understand if you're writing a lot of them, they can get kind of, samey. But at least for this game, we had such different characters. Yeah. And each of them had such different themes that to then sort of try to coalesce each of those into the boss battle sort of vibe was always a unique challenge. And I think really is all it is that my favorite tracks ended up sort of coming into that. Like, I love what Boss Finn's theme turned into.
Yes.
Sort of started as this like David Lynch inspired Twin Peaks kind of smoky jazz thing. But then, for the boss battle track, I'm like, well, I'm going to just take that and throw it to a full big band and an orchestra, which I was lucky to have. We only had that sax section for that cue and one other one. But like, I don't know, it just, for whatever reason, those boss battle tracks always ended up being like, okay, here's our chance to just go crazy. What are we going to do? Yeah. And I like that freedom. But I won't lie, those were the hardest to write too. So, I definitely banged my head against the wall the most getting those right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they're complex texturally too. Like there's a lot going on. I mean, these are boss battle tracks. This is not, unique in that way. I mean, there's a lot to kind of wrap your brain around, and there's a lot I think that you're representing musically, which is awesome. Those are really fun, and a lot of those versus tracks in particular, not necessarily the boss battle, but a lot of the versus tracks do bring in that chiptune sound, which is really cool. I like the kind of arpeggiations that you bring in.
Yeah, that's one little thing. I was trying to tie them together a little bit by having that arpeggio and all of them. I don't know if I'm 100% consistent, but little things like that were ways that I tried to make it feel like a unified score.
Yeah. I mean, and the themes are enough to do that in and of themselves, because there are such memorable themes, I'll just be like randomly whistling one of them, just like wandering down the hall. I'm like, oh, that's from Potionomics. that's what I woke up with in my head this day or whatever. So I really liked that. I loved, honestly, those first several tracks that are, for the most part, and I'm talking in the soundtrack, so this is not necessarily how they appear in the game, but, in the soundtrack itself, a lot of that stuff is very orchestral and very kind of like fantasy, sort of, but more like family-friendly orchestral. You know what I mean? And I loved it. I mean, I hope that you take this as a compliment. Like, it just reminded me of films. It just reminded me of like Saturday afternoon films, kind of.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, I mean, I mentioned this elsewhere, but I think one of the reasons Jody wanted me on board, or was excited about me being on board, was that I had been working on music for Disney for a while, and I do a lot of music for their Disney Junior TV shows. I think I'm on their fourth or fifth now, and it's funny. I never set out to do that. It wasn't. I was always expecting to be working on. I mean, I always aimed to be working on like highbrow, like long burn sci-fi and indie films and dark comedies, things like that. Disney kind of fell into my lap when after sort of a random series of events that started with collaborating with my college buddy Rob Cantor on a viral video from 2014 called Actual Cannibal Shia LaBeouf that did pretty crazy views, and that led him to Disney, which also, and then since we had worked on that together, he introduced me around, and that's led to a long collaboration. Cool. And Johnny really wanted, he loves Pixar, he loves Studio Ghibli, and so do I, and so that's really what one of our influences, maybe sort of the overarching influence were animated movies, and then that comes through in the animation too. I mean, he could have done the whole game in 2D, right? I mean, there didn't need to be 3D models for each of these characters, but he wanted, but for him, the expression and the aesthetic that sort of Pixar-like quality brought to the game was worth the money. And really, what it comes down to is money, right? Because you do have to pay for that, and it is more expensive. Yeah. And it's sort of strange, because it is just like, on the one hand, it is just an aesthetic choice. If you just sort of break it down to its roots, like a 2D game is just as, like a game that maybe I think maybe Reciteer was all 2D. A game like that is just as much creative like value as a 3D game, but because that aesthetic is it's just more complicated, you sort of have to be willing to invest in it. Same with the music, because Jody, he didn't have to earmark some of his budget for a live orchestra, but he really wanted it. He really loves live orchestra, and since we can record overseas in a little bit more of an affordable way now, it was something that we could afford to do.
Yeah. So worth it. I mean, the orchestra sounds great, and I've heard the Budapest. I mean, they're all over the place these days, and it's because they're great. You know, they're absolutely fantastic, and they I mean, it's just very beautiful, expressive playing, and I loved all the orchestral stuff. I also absolutely adored all of the soloists that you worked with, some of whom were yourself, which is great. But of course, Kristen Nagus has been on the show. Absolutely adore her. I've known of her for, I can't even say how long, just ages. Since one of her first games, I think I knew of her. And so she's fantastic. And then the violinist, Patty, she sounded fantastic. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I met them both probably at the same convention that I met Jody. Actually, I didn't meet Jody there. I met Corey Blackburn, the co-founder of Voracious Games. I think I met them all the same year.
Oh, funny.
It was kind of just this very productive year at the Game Developers Conference, probably back in 2016. Because Patty and Kristen are friends. Yeah. And, you know, I don't even know where we met. Might have just been introduced through... I probably just ran into them. I was meeting a lot of other composers, and they're all raving about the musicians they work with. And you know, I mean, Kristen at this point has played on almost. I joked on Twitter recently that like there should be someone should correlate the number of award-winning games with the ones that Kristen plays with. They'd probably see that your chances of winning are much higher if Kristen is involved. But
it's very true.
But yeah, they're really great to work with. Patty's great because she's an amazing musician, but she also has an amazing YouTube channel, and so she just loves sort of filming herself doing her thing, and so she was really excited to film her solo for me. I don't know if you saw any of the behind the scenes videos we made, but
I did not, and I will.
Yeah, she's on the some of the Versus tracks, and Kristen just plays everything, and
right. I know, it's true.
And if she doesn't play it, she'll learn it. She'll be like, no, I don't have a bass flute right now, but I can rent one, or there's always something that she can pick up. And often what I'll do is I'll just be like, I don't know what I want to do on this track. Give me some, like, can you just throw your arsenal at it and see what we like? And that's really valuable as a composer, because sometimes, you know, we just don't know what we don't know. And especially with a musician who knows their instrument so well, I mean, I can sort of try to dictate exactly what I want, but you know, that me doing that removes all of her experience in a way if I'm too specific. Sure. So I try to also give the musicians I work with room to, you know, what would you do with this if you were making it your own? And that usually oftentimes results in something unexpected and great.
Yeah, that's a really important part of collaboration, right? Is to allow the other person to input their creative ideas. I mean, this is how beautiful things get made, because yes, obviously you have an amazing gift to write music, but these people have amazing gifts too. Let's see how we can combine things and make it even better. So that was just a joy to hear all of these different people kind of woven through, and it turns out you're a trombone player, and so you played too. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, trombone was my first love, I guess, in music. I don't even know why I chose that instrument, honestly. I thought it looked cool. You know, here's another thing. I was a big Trekkie at that time, like in fourth grade.
William Riker.
Riker, right. He played it. I mean, that must be why. I mean, I can't imagine any other reason. So I blame the writers of The Next Generation who assigned for whatever reason. And that's how they would do it on that show, too. They didn't have like budgets for different sets for the different actors. So they just moved the prop that, you know, like... that exemplified that character. So for Riker, they just put the trombone in the back for all of his scenes in his quarters, but
like personal scenes.
Right. It's But anyway, so I chose the trombone, and I took an instant affinity to music in general. I don't know. I was never really good at. I was always struggling for. Gym was a daily terror of mine, going into gym class. So to find an extracurricular that I could really excel on was really just freeing for me. I didn't end up. I did major in it for a minute, but I ended up with some injuries, some mouth embouchure problems that set me back like 50%. I could barely play for more than 45 minutes. My high range was gone, so I decided to switch to something else that I was interested in, which was writing music and film music, and I'm really glad that I did. But I still keep it around. I use it every now and then. I don't get to use it too often. But again, in a game like this where the characters are just so outlandish, there's opportunity for everything. I mean, there's the trombones in there, the melodica, which I have to thank my friends Isaac Schenkler and John Robert Matz for introducing me to.
Nice.
Which is this really goofy looking instrument that has like a tube attached to it, and it's a little keyboard. Yeah. So I use that. I kind of, I have a room full of toys that, I again, don't use as often as I would like. But on a project like this, where it called for so many different techniques, I kind of could just dive into everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very
feel free to
fun.
Stop me if I'm rambling. I know I go
ramble
for a while.
Away. That's what this is all about. We just turn on the things
ramble
and
hour.
Let you go.
Okay. But yeah, I was glad to find a place for it. I'm frustrated that I did not come up with a obvious video, like social media thing with Trombone Hero, right? That's what it's called.
Yeah, is that what it was called? Oh, I'm very familiar with it, but I'm not familiar enough to remember. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I should have been able to find a way to make a video about that, but the problem is we had this thing happen where we had a baby, and I kind of have no more time to do fun stuff. So I'm glad
babies
I was able
are
to
like
do
that.
Yeah.
I've had many conversations about babies today, interestingly enough, and I'm going to go see one as soon as this is over.
Okay.
Yeah. Just random baby talk today. Interestingly. Yeah. Babies are cool, though. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thanks. It's a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
More for Jessica, but...
Well, just get a mouthpiece in their hand right away. As a trumpet player, I can relate to all the things you said about embouchure problems and such, and just make sure that instead of a rattle, they have a mouthpiece.
No, I want them to be a string player, I think.
String player, here it starts. Yep, okay. Yeah. That's a good idea, though.
Guitar, even not brass. It's too loud.
It's loud, and I mean, they're all emotional endeavors. I think, whenever you have that kind of an intimate relationship with an inanimate object, as an instrument, it's an emotional part of life. I don't know, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
There's some choir spots that I really liked too.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about how that worked out, particularly a binding agreement, which is
thanks.
really fun. But there are other spots as well that they pop in.
Well, I would love the chance to work with a full choir, but that was one of the things we couldn't really afford on this project. We only had about 6 hours with the orchestra, which
wow.
was a lot of. I don't know if you think that's a lot of time or not.
But
it's
I don't.
Not a lot of time. Yeah, it's not a lot of time for a game with this much music.
Right.
And again, the choir was just not. The choir would I want. There were a couple of things with the choir. I knew that if I worked with the choir, that especially if I did it overseas, there would be more issues with translation than I knew I had time for. When you're working overseas in a different language, everything that you say has to be, of course, translated, and that takes a lot of extra time. And when lyrics are involved, it's going to get way more complicated. So I didn't even want to even try that until So I wanted to work with musicians that I had worked with before, and the group that I ended up working with is this trio of female vocalists called Artemisia. And I went to college with Diana, she's one of the gals in that group, and known her forever. I've collaborated with her on a bunch of things, and I mean, I guess you want to know just sort of like I'll say a couple things. A binding agreement was originally written as Helene's theme, and I'm sorry, I guess it's Helen. I never got a straight answer on which way we're pronouncing her name. So.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Either
Joanne. I'm getting it wrong. I'm apologizing to the developer who's probably going to yell at me. Her name's Joanne, and she was focused on most of the marketing for the game as well as sort of overall just game development. She'll be yelling at me for that. But anyway, so her, one of the things that we didn't want to do with her, like we knew I didn't want to do oohs and ahs. Joanne was really passionate that we not use English because she didn't want it to be like a baked in language that wouldn't translate to other countries. And I also didn't want to use Latin personally because I thought Latin was a little bit overused in games at this point. And it also has sort of like just a real heaviness to it that I didn't necessarily think was appropriate for this game. And so I decided to, I was like, well, let's make a language, right? Let's just do that. That'll be easy enough. I actually talked to the narrative designer for a second about it, Nick. But this was in crunch. This was in crunch time by the time we were figuring this out. And he was like, I'm really into it, but I've got 1,000 other things I'm doing.
Can't really
he didn't say no, but I got the sense that this was probably not gonna be something he can make time for. So I found this really amazing thing online called the Vulgarlang language generator, which is this, it's like this algorithmic tool, and the website looks like 1990s sort of era website design, very simple, but the tool is amazing. It's super deep. It'll basically create a new language for you. You can just click on it and it'll generate something. And if you want to go deep into it, you can dictate the number of consonants, the number of vowels. I did do a little bit of tweaking, but I don't really have the knowledge to go crazy with it. So I kind of just worked with it for a while until I found something that I liked. I fed it my lyrics. It gave me the language back. Amazing. I then put it through an AI, like a voice synthesis program where you could assign different accents. So I assigned it a Hungarian accent, and then I sent that to the vocalists and was like, make this work. And I think it sounds great. I love how it sounds. I think it sounds alien, but not too. I think it still sounds friendly. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that. And they were amazing to work with. They recorded in Chicago remotely, and they all have masks on because it's during COVID. And but I was really glad that they could be on board.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Just to kind of go back to what you were saying about how you kind of like stumbled into Disney, or I can't remember your exact wording.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of references in your bio to your punk life. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's so antithetical, right? To like the Disney sound in a way. So I'd love to know about that part of your musicality.
Well, I've always, again, I didn't expect to be working for Disney. I always thought that I'd be writing darker music. Yeah. And I still want to. I mean, growing up, I was equally influenced by composers like Silent Hill, Akira Yamaoka, I think, right? I loved what he created in those early PlayStation games. Like, I thought it was just unlike anything I'd ever heard before, and it really introduced me to more experimental music. But then I was also loving Nobuo Uematsu's soundtracks for Final Fantasy, which again are they couldn't be further apart.
Right.
And even sort of the early music that I was interested in, film music wise, I was gravitating towards movies like Terminator 2, which had had this sort of duality of the very industrial da-dum 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 theme paired with a more melodic. If you know the soundtrack at all, there's that beautiful da 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 dum, da 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 dum melody for the end. I feel like I have a lot of that duality in me, where I can appreciate both of those sides of the musical spectrum. So your original question was, sorry again. The punk rock side.
Yeah, just how that kind of informs you.
I think that's just where that comes from. I mean, I think I specifically mentioned a band I was in called Mukapatsa, which was a punk rock marching band. And that was amazing. As a trombone player, there aren't that many opportunities to be really punk, right? But that was one of them. That group, and then another one called Kill Sonic that I found when I moved to LA for a little while. Both had sort of punk aesthetics to them, I would say, but mixing, but in a way that was mixing genres that weren't typically associated with punk music, right? I mean,
sure, yep.
Kapatsa was a mix of sort of TV theme covers and Balkan music, and then Kill Sonic was sort of a free jazz, like carnival vibe. I mean, it really depends on how you define punk. Like if you want to go real strict with it, or if you just want to think of it as sort of a vibe.
Yeah.
I don't think I could really claim I'm any real punk cred, but but I'm proud of being a member of Mukapatsa. I will say that.
Awesome.
That's the most fun I've ever had with that instrument.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Toward the end of we have to talk about the pirate cats. Like that's how someone tipped me off. They're like, you have to hear this pirate, because I'm a cat person. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, well, I wonder what the rest of this soundtrack is like. And then I think I emailed you within like 5 minutes. I was like, well, this is fantastic. So it's nothing like, not that, I mean, if it had all been like the pirate cats, I probably wouldn't have emailed you. But the one pirate cats track is amazing. So tell me about it.
Thank you for listening to the rest of the soundtrack. Yeah, I
definitely.
There have been a couple of reviews that were like, why isn't everything else like this? This is so much fun. I'm like, well, I don't think you really know what you're asking for here.
I know, I think that's, leave them wanting more, Greg. Yes.
Some people, right. I mean, some things are really just meant for small doses. And this was one of them. Like, even in the track itself, I was sort of concerned that the meows would get overbearing. I was wrong about that. It was definitely the right amount.
It's perfect.
So just a little backstory. I mean, the characters that track is written for, they're a pair of cat pirates.
Yeah.
Salt and Pepper are their names. One's a big black cat. One's a small white cat. And I mean, I can't claim. So Jody and Duran both wanted meows to be integrated. They wanted them to be like samples of actual cats, because most YouTube cat video like remixes they'll like sample the meow and they'll repitch it for every.
Sure.
I don't know. I felt that I mean I think that's funny when you first hear it, but I thought it's I don't know. I thought it was too annoying for repeated listening. And so I thought, why not just sing the meow myself? That's also funny, but it's a little less grating. And I did it like chipmunk style, where I have a very low voice, obviously. I'm singing on the Muck Tuck track, actually, so all that bass stuff.
Oh, cool.
But for this, I did it chipmunk style, where you record it at twice the speed, and then you play it back at double speed, and so you get the Alvin and the Chipmunk style. It's they were cool with it. They thought it sounded great, and we went with it. And I did not know it would be the most popular track in the soundtrack, but I guess I should have known that. And,
I know, right? In hindsight, you're like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Sure.
It's the internet populace. Yeah. Oh, it's so funny.
What I'm proud about that track is that it still has some like musical depth to it. Like it's a meow track, but I'm also like, I'm a music geek, so I played a lot of Percy Grainger in high school. So that for me, track's drawing on some of those harmonies that I remember.
Oh, and, fun.
I'm proud of how it turned out.
Oh, that's great. Percy Grainger. Man, I haven't heard that name in a bit.
Right.
No, that's good. That's good. You also said something about a sax section, and I don't know if they're on this track or not, but Sylvia versus Roxanne has this most badass Barry sax part.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Tell me about that one.
Oh, well, that's the other track that has the sax section. I had those guys for the first hour of the session in with Budapest, and it was also so that was stressful because we were starting with the hardest tracks in the game right off the bat. Oh, geez.
Okay.
Especially Boss Finn was a real tough one to get. What we ended up with was great, but first thing at this is like 6 a.m. We're trying to, on my end, trying to figure this out while I'm waking up. That Barry sax part, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. You should watch the video if you haven't seen it, because the Barry sax gets some love. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in that particular section of the piece. I actually recorded a couple different, tenor sax solos, a trumpet solo. But at the end of the day, I was like, let's just Barry sax and melodica. Just make it forefront. Don't hide it. It's fun. I mean,
so great.
A lot of my decisions with a lot of these tracks were just what would be funnier. What would be charming / ironic / have sort of a wink to it, since that's sort of the vibe of the game.
Yeah, well, and it comes through in the soundtrack. Like, it sounds like fun. Like,
Right.
It sounds like whoever was playing on it was likely having a lot of fun, and it sounds like you must have had a lot of fun writing it, which is great.
Yeah, yeah, and I also to credit Mukapatsa again, I would say they have a big influence on that track because we had some great Barry sax players in that band, and they really taught me, what a Barry sax rhythm should sound like, and
awesome.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah, there aren't that many projects where I get to draw on so many of my own influences, and that was one of the joys of this. As someone who loves singing in choirs, I played in big bands, played in punk rock marching bands. I was able to find a place for all of it in this game, and that was really rewarding.
Oh yeah, nice. Another track I really liked, the effects in Date Night. If I tell you that name, are you familiar with that one? Yeah. Talk to me about that track.
Yeah. That's so that's the track that plays when you go to you're basically in the game. There's a lot of time spent in relationship building. I alluded to this a little earlier, but while you're hanging out with these characters, you also have the opportunity to romance them, and you can romance almost anybody in the game. This track played when you're basically sort of a little further into your relationship and going out, hanging out in the downtown areas together. We wanted it to be light and bouncy, and I don't know. Do you have any specific questions about it? Like, there's a cool synth in there that's got a kind of like...
It's the synth.
Yeah, I found this patch. I'm not sure if it was this Korg synth that I was using, but I picked up a Korg Minilog XD that I used a bit on this project. But nice. It's got this sort of like... it has a long glide, so that when you go between the notes, it slurs up and down. But it's also got this bubbliness to it. It's got an arpeggio going on it, so it doesn't feel... Like synths, I feel like we usually think about synths, at least in the film and game world, as being dark and grittier, but they can also be, bubbly and goofy as well. And that was a sound that I felt like was perfect to sort of just sort of accompany this. It's mostly an acoustic track because it's got the brush jazz drums and the ukulele, but yeah, that synth gave it that little extra something that just reminds you in a way that you're playing a video game. In some ways, I don't want to necessarily think about genres so specifically that you use synths for video games and not for other things. But there is a bit of that when you're drawing on nostalgia, which a lot of Potionomics is. So I would sometimes think about synths in that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Greg, you've done a lot of television and film. Is this the first game? I know you've also worked on other games, but was this the first one where you were like the lead dude?
Yeah, I did a little bit of orchestration and additional music on a bunch of projects a while ago, back when I was part of sort of an orchestration team. And but this was the first project that I was sort of the only composer on, the lead composer, that actually made it to market. I have worked on a bunch of other things, indie games that just kind of fell apart midstream, and I guess that's a pretty common thing to happen in the gaming world. They're hard to let go, because some of the best music I've written is for some projects that never got released, and
that hurts. Yeah,
I'd feel worse about it if it wasn't so common, because I know a lot of other composers who have the same experience.
Yeah, that must be rough to face when you spend so much time on something and then no one gets to hear it.
I could technically put it out there, but and I might, but I mean, it's just the kind of thing where people just the game might get finished, for one thing, the one that I'm thinking about. And otherwise, it's just, there's certainly a matter of just, there won't be really an audience for it. I mean, I'm not really a household name in the sense that people are going to seek out my work on its own. And that's sort of just the nature of being a film or game composer. We are as big as the projects that we work on for the most part. So yeah, I'll put it out there maybe later. Maybe I'll do a rearrange it, reorchestrate it. Hopefully the game will get finished.
Yeah. And there's been something, but then I let it go twice now.
I talked too much.
No. I'll think of it. Oh yeah, and I knew it was along these lines. So, having had all these other experiences in media, I'm always curious, like what do you value about working on games, or what do you just talk to me about kind of the differences there for you personally?
Yeah, it's a very different medium. Film and TV. That there's a lot of technical differences that change the creative process. So film and TV, you generally have a scene, and you know how long that scene is, and so you're writing a piece of music that starts and ends at the same time, every time. But with games, of course, it's the player that dictates the length and the duration of a lot of the music that you're writing. So you really need to be thinking like a game designer. You also are more free to just be bolder and bigger with game scores because, in most cases in games, you're probably not competing with dialogue constantly the way that you are in film or TV. So you can have bigger melodies, you can have larger orchestrations or productions because gameplay kind of demands that, and that means we get to write music that's just richer in a lot of cases. I think that's why game music grew like such a massive fandom because the music itself gets to be bolder. So I like to say that I grew a lot as a composer working in Potionomics because I hadn't for a long time, like in college and as a younger kid, I was writing music more for me, right? But when I got more into film TV, I was getting a lot more used to writing to picture, which gave me a lot of, again, sort of the strict boundaries of the scene. With games, there aren't as many strict boundaries. You have to be able to write music, without the help, the aid of a picture, of a scene. And so it really reminded me how to compose and be more free with it, because on this project, I would oftentimes be writing music that I didn't like. For whatever reason, I couldn't put a finger on why it wasn't working. I just knew it wasn't working. And so I would, oftentimes in the past, I might just discard it and start again. But in this project, Potionomics, I quickly learned that almost all of the music that I was writing did serve some sort of purpose. I just had to find a place for it. So I would always just leave it, start again with something new. And then when I would reach a point where I wasn't sure what to do, I would bring some of that other material in and realize, this is perfect here, because oftentimes what those other sort of diversions were developments of ideas that, weren't like the main course of the meal, but were perfect as sort of the diversion, the place to go to get the listener to, to create a sense of drama so that when you go back to the main course, it feels like you've had a musical journey. So I really learned how to just preserve everything that I'm doing and repurpose it in a way that I think I was a little less used to doing before this project. I could talk a lot about differences between the mediums if you want, but what else would you like to hear about?
I just always like to hear, what composers enjoy about each, because they all have value, right? Like television is its own special little place where composers write things at a breakneck speed and it's gone. But then games, you have all this time in some cases, and everybody has their own little kind of story about likes and dislikes about them. So
I'll give you one more answer for that. Then I'll say that games are sort of so movies let you create this beautiful, self-contained, dense world, right? Musically, where, it's an hour and a half of material, which isn't really all that much longer than a TV episode, but because of the way movies are structured, because of the way that they build, your score ends up usually being, starting at a relatively small pace, but usually getting richer and richer and richer as you, the audience, get more emotionally involved. The music gets richer and richer, right? TV, it's a little different because you usually never get quite as sort of emotionally, the peaks are never not quite within a single episode are not quite as high as you'll get in a movie emotionally. And so the music sort of serves a different function. but because TV is stretched over a long period of time, you'll eventually get there. And so you have to be a little more patient and just focus more on the palette and the world that you're delivering, and then engage the narrative from a much broader scale. Games, I think, are an interesting combination of the two, because your musical richness is, I'm trying to draw a parallel here that I've never drawn before, actually, but I see parallels between the two, because games are a much bigger world than movies are. So you have almost the amount of material that you would for a TV show. Right. But in a way, it can actually it can still feel more like a movie, in the sense that it's building like a movie might narratively. I'm really just going off on a tangent here.
No, I love it.
But they're all a little different. I really love working across the different mediums, because it gives me a new perspective on music and my work. And I think for me, that's important as an artist, because it's really easy to get into ruts creatively. And
Now, before we started, you asked me, like, how did I get into video game music, or how did I like get into being interested in all these things that I'd certainly thought about, but never, I don't know. But I'd like to kind of ask the same of you. Like, it sounds like you had this kind of lifelong love for film scores too, and you talked a little bit about it earlier in the conversation. But I'd like to know a little bit more about your draw to composing for film and TV and games.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real just sort of like childhood like obsession, I think.
Okay.
I don't know if I listened to a lot of music before I really got into games and TV. I mean, I think it's as weird as it sounds, that's really where my musical education started, because, you know, I would just feel such intense emotion playing these games or watching these films, and you know, as we are as kids, we feel everything so intensely, and I was just drawn to why, you know, I wanted to know why and how I felt this way. And when I realized I could listen to some of these soundtracks away from the game or away from the movie, I would feel these same feelings, and I just got addicted to that rush and that high, those emotional highs and lows. And so I really was just falling in love with movies and games, I think. But then the music was sort of the entry point for me. And I think I probably could have equally become a game designer or a filmmaker or a writer. But because I also was falling in love with music as a musician at the same time, through an amazing music program that my public school had,
cool.
It became sort of the obvious route for me to go. I was, you know, playing trombone. I was singing in choir. My choir director was. I hate to make this comparison, but you've probably seen the movie Whiplash, right?
Yes.
You know, that's the one with La La Land. That director, his first movie was Whiplash.
Oh,
with the really intense jazz.
Yep.
Drummer and his sort of abusive mentor. My choir director was not that guy, but he had that level of intensity.
Okay.
But just put it towards more of a positive, almost like a. I mean, a football coach is not maybe the best description. I've never played football, but I know that like coaches can get a little bit more like, it can be a little more tough love in a way.
Yeah.
He was a cross between, I guess, the guy from Whiplash and the guy from Mr. Holland's Opus. If you can kind of merge those two together. And he gave me the bug, basically. I think that's how they call it, right? Like him.
Yep.
His passion for music was so contagious that I just knew I had to do it for a living at that point. All those forces coming together is what pushed me into film music and game music. And
where'd you grow up?
Connecticut. East Coast.
And are you still on the East Coast? I can't remember when we scheduled. I should know this.
No, it's fine. I'm in LA. I moved out here. It took me a long time to grow to appreciate it. But my wife, she was a native Angelino. She was born here.
Okay, wow.
House is in Hollywood, so you know I'm very much now. I'm in it, right?
Yep. I love it out there, man. California. I mean, I'm in Minneapolis, so it's very different, but. But I do love visiting out there. I love it. I don't even mind driving around. I don't know. I probably would mind that bit if I lived there, but I just find it a joy.
I was just mad at it for calling itself a city. Like I was used to New York and Chicago, and it was just, this isn't a city. Yeah. This is just a bunch of strip malls. But
it's a sprawl. Yeah.
But now that I'm older and aren't just looking for that urban environment, I actually appreciate it more.
Yeah.
Than those more urbanized spaces, because you can get that urban environment if you want, but you also get the coast, you get the ocean, you get wine country, you have the mountains, you have all of that within driving distance, the desert, which is really an amazing thing.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Well, Greg, what more do you want to say about Potionomics or anything?
I don't know. I guess if you're watching this, I guess you've played the game, because you probably wouldn't find it otherwise, or maybe you're obviously fans of Emily's, but just thank you for playing the game. Thank you for listening to the soundtrack. In many ways, this is the first time that my music's found an audience, and I can't tell you how validating that's been as a composer, to just hear people's opinions on it. I mean, it's been mostly positive, luckily, but even the negative ones are great to engage with and learn from. And so thank you for listening, and thank you for watching this podcast. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm happy to try to respond to email, and I don't know. I just, it's been great talking with you, Emily, and about my work, and thank you for all the thoughtful questions. You're the only person that's so far singled out the trombone, for example, or like I appreciate that you have a musical background, so that you're able to sort of be a little more specific. So thank you.
Yeah, and each listen, there's details. There's just wonderful details that pop up throughout the soundtrack. It really was a pleasure to hear it, and I just look forward to whatever's coming up next for you.
Yeah. I can't wait to. I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. I mean, more Disney stuff if you have little kids.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm hoping to get some more game projects, because I had so much fun on this one.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Greg.
All right. Thank you, Emily.